Hello there. On today's video on obscure topics that only I care about, I'm going to be talking about the Spanish playwright Lope de Vega and how he challenged Neoclassicism. So first off, I should probably explain what is Neoclassicism. Classicism, it's a weird word, Neoclassicism. Put it on screen. It's an ideal developed in Italy during the late 16th century as a response to Catholic Church pushing sense of order and authority. In essence, it's a sense of rules which all regular theater had to follow at the time, should follow at the time, based on the classical writings of Aristotle and Horace. All theater is reduced to two forms, comedy and tragedy. The forms don't mix. The most important demand of it, and the most difficult to follow, was verisimilitude, meaning the appearance of truth, manifested through a few sub-goals. So, reality, no supernatural events unless they were biblical or mythic, known things, no battles, no crowd scenes, no violence and death. Basically, anything that couldn't literally be represented on stage as if it were happening in reality shouldn't be in plays under the concept of verisimilitude. This applies to time, place, and action as well. The narrative of a play couldn't take place over a period longer than a day or feature any major changes in location or anything like that. The other two sub-concepts are morality. Plays needed to teach moral lessons, and universality, the establishment of norms in characterization and elsewhere. Essential truths, basically, that remained accepted facts regardless of the particulars of the characters or plot or show or whatever. These were the metrics theater was critiqued based on in the 16th and 17th centuries, these metrics of verisimilitude and neoclassicism. Although really, only the French theater took these ideas firmly to heart. Italians were more focused on commedia dell'arte, or like improv comedy, and the Spanish had their own golden age of theater around the same time, completely independent of these rules, but it was still considered a golden age. So they're what I'm going to talk about today. So during the Spanish Golden Age, there was a playwright named Lope de Vega. And the Spanish Golden Age went on from 1580 to 1680, so about 100 years of peak Spanish playwriting that did not follow neoclassicism. And the big part of the reason it didn't follow neoclassical thinking is that Lope de Vega didn't follow this line of thinking. He was the most prolific playwright of the Spanish Golden Age. And when I say prolific, I mean like really prolific. His work was a case of, his critics would say, quantity over quality. By 1609, he claimed to have written 483 plays. His total output was somewhere from 800 to 1800. Now, this guy wrote a lot of plays. I don't know how he did it. Like Shakespeare, everybody talks about Shakespeare. Shakespeare did not write this much. Even his other Spanish contemporaries did not write this much. Like, this is a truly crazy, like, phenomenal amount of output. And everybody else in that era everybody else, all the other Spanish playwrights of that era kind of followed his style because he was just the most prominent playwright of the time, simply by writing so much, like, good work. But the specific work of his that I want to talk about today is not a play. It's a work of dramatic criticism that he wrote in 1609 called The New Art of Writing Plays. In this work, he firmly rejects the neoclassical theories in favor of a style which he knows pleases the popular audience of the time. Now, the tone of the work is courteous. He's not necessarily condemning neoclassical theory, but he's writing a defense of the alternative style which he and his contemporaries utilize, particularly when it comes to writing comedy and merging tragic and comic elements. Because as I mentioned before, in neoclassical theory, tragedy and comedy were not to be mixed. They were two separate types, and there was this idea of purity of dramatic form that he was very much not with. He says, he says in The New Art of Writing Plays, "Tragedy mixed with comedy, and Terence with Seneca, will render one part grave, the other part ridiculous, for this variety causes much delight. Nature gives us good example, for through such variety it is beautiful." Now, why I selected this event is that I just, in my theater history class this semester, I've been learning a lot, and within those lessons, the Spanish Golden Age was particularly fascinating to me in how Spain's theater traditions differ from their contemporaries of the time, owing to the country's unique history where it was occupied by Moors for a long time under Islamic religion, and then when Spain was like freed from that occupation, there was the Spanish Inquisition, and so there was a much stronger Catholic Church and religious presence in Spain and in their theater compared to other areas. So even the secular plays often came to conclusions which would reinforce the importance of God, focus on conflicting themes of love and honor would usually win in this realm. And the playwrights of Spain were writing hundreds of plays under this format. Much bigger output compared to Shakespeare or anyone who followed the classical ideas. Like, Lope de Vega certainly wrote the most, but his contemporaries were also writing hundreds, like obscenely high amounts of plays. The language of their plays was very lively, and it flowed between verse structures rather than sticking with one, like, iambic pentameter English verse. There seemed to have been even less of a focus on, like, classic Greco-Roman subjects, which were popular in other countries at the time. So they were it was a very, unique theatrical output compared to the other countries producing theater in the 1500s and 1600s. And Lope de Vega really set the standard for this era of Spanish theater, both in terms of output and in how his style was emulated by other Spanish playwrights. So that kind of led me to the question that I thought was interesting. Why would the leading playwright of what was called a golden era speak out against the critically accepted proper form of theater at the time? I found this question very interesting, and I wanted to look into explaining this very, very Spanish act of rebellion. And what I found while I was looking into this, becoming the expert in the subject, if you will, was that Lope de Vega himself was a rather rebellious figure. He was selected by the bishop of Avila at the age of 15 to attend a university and study for priesthood, but he ended up running off with a married woman. In the 1580s, he had another affair with a married woman, and when that affair fell through, his affair with the actress Elena Osorio, I don't know how to say it, but he wrote plays for her father while having an affair with her. And then when the affair went sour, he ended his agreement to write plays for her father and wrote such harsh attacks on her and her family that in 1587 he was arrested for them in the middle of a performance. He was arrested for this and sentenced to exile for 8 years. But of course, he couldn't leave for exile without taking his new lover, a 16-year-old girl named Isabel de Urbina, with him. And so they were married. Then she dies in 1595 in childbirth. And in 1596, he has another new tumultuous relationship, which causes yet another lawsuit and legal battle. He also had a 20-year love affair with actress Michaela de Lujan. These names they're Spanish. It's a little hard to say. And he had a second marriage to Juana de Gardo, who people said it was a marriage of convenience because she was the daughter of a wealthy man. Suffice it to say, this is all to say, Lope de Vega was very horny. Quite the ladies' man. In 1614, he became a priest, but he never got the full benefits of being a clergyman because he couldn't resist, constantly sleeping with different women. And then between all of these love affairs and all of these, hundreds of plays he wrote, he also sailed with the Spanish Armada. So, Lope de Vega is just a crazy busy dude. He had this rivalry with Miguel de Cervantes, the author of the famous 1605 novel Don Quixote? Don Quixote, yeah, I forget how to say it sometimes, but yes. The author of Don Quixote, who was writing books at the same time, and the two of them had a serious feud at the time. Don Quixote itself features elements that could be perceived as critique of Lope's work and of his personal life. For example, the protagonist of the novel is crazy for women and writes about them in his work, which Lope de Vega was also prone to write about whatever woman he was with at the time in his poetry or scripts. A full sequel, I didn't know this before doing the research for this, but a full sequel to Don Quixote was written, and nobody knows who the author was, and there are theories that Lope de Vega wrote it to, like, get at Cervantes. I couldn't find an exact reason why the two were rivals, like a concrete reason. Cervantes may have been jealous of Lope's success as a playwright, because Cervantes wrote plays too, but they never had as much success. Lope may have been offended by Cervantes critiquing him. There's some critique that Lope claimed was from Cervantes, but was actually from someone else. So it's a whole thing. No matter the facts and the truth of it, no matter the reason between their feud, it's undeniable the two had a major feud that I could probably make an entire other video about. But back to the main topic. Why did Lope de Vega write the new art of writing plays? Why did he go out of his way to critique Neoclassicism? I think the reason for this may be, and there's not a lot of evidence to support this, but just judging from his personality, he was clearly a controversial figure, even in his time. He's immensely popular, his work was loved by the people, but his tendency for, like, his showmanship tendency and his, like, frivolous nature with relationships were surely criticized by, like, church people and all sorts of people, especially because he was so popular. Like, that would, anyone who gets popular is going to have their flaws put under the microscope. And his rivalry with Cervantes proves that he wasn't loved by everyone. His defensiveness in that feud between him and Cervantes suggests he may have had a rather contentious attitude towards criticism of himself. I think it's possible that this attitude prompted him to defend his techniques against those who pushed the neoclassical style. Although little in the work, The New Art of Writing Plays, actually suggests that he is looking to start an argument. But it's easy to read his tone as rather cavalier about his own defiance of art. Towards the end of the work, he writes this not-so-humble brag, but what can I do if I have written 483 comedies, along with one, which I have finished this week? It's very easy to imagine him almost challenging his opponents who opposed his style, like, come at me, bring it on, I can take you down, I'm more popular than you are. And I just find that very entertaining, to say the least. I felt a very strong personal connection to this topic because, like Lope de Vega, I've always been a bit of a rebel. Not so much the womanizing thing, like, that's his thing, but I tend to shirk traditional ideas of, like, authority and creative rules, mainly because I just don't think there should be any creative rules. Like, I would scoff at the neoclassical ideas. I think most people would nowadays, but, like, even at the time, it's like, particularly in comedy. With comedy, I tend to operate under the logic of whatever I find funny is funny. And I've been criticized throughout my life for having a frivolous attitude about certain things. So I think I understand where Lope de Vega may have been coming from when he wrote the new act of writing plays. I've never been overly concerned about theater as an art form. My primary goals are usually more to entertain or inspire passion. So, as Lope de Vega said, let one hear with attention, and dispute not of the art. Enjoy a creative work for what it is, not what it isn't. And that'll be all for this video. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and arrivederci!